If you're currently studying for your CompTIA Security Plus exam, then this is the video for you because I passed my exam on my first attempt. And in this video, we're going to go over 10 practice questions from domain 2 of the exam objectives: threats, vulnerabilities, and mitigations. So let's get started. Question 1. Which of the following is the most associated with the implementation of a HIPS? Insider threat, malicious code, unskilled attacker, or impossible travel? And the correct answer is malicious code because a HIPS is the acronym for a host-based intrusion prevention system. And regardless of where this system is placed, whether it's a network-based intrusion prevention system or a host-based intrusion prevention system, this blocks malware threats, and that's why it's associated with malicious code. Insider threat is an attacker in an organization, typically someone like a disgruntled employee who would do something like take a USB drive or a hard drive and exfiltrate terabytes and terabytes of sensitive company information and simply walk out of the organization and leak that information online. An unskilled attacker is the least so sophisticated group of attackers in the Security Plus exam objectives, and this refers to an attacker who doesn't really know what they're doing. They're just testing random tools in an attempt that something will work. So they're typically associated with things like DDoS or distributed denial of service attacks, or website defacement, because these are the two easiest forms of cyber attack that you can perform without being very knowledgeable or having a practical understanding of how hacking tools work. Impossible travel is the concept of looking at user logins and saying, okay, I see two different logins from two different countries. That would be physically impossible for one of those users to log in from one country and then log in from that secondary country within such a short time span. So, for example, you might see in the logs of a user account login that one user logged in at 9 a.m. from the USA, and then at 9:10 they logged in from China. So that's physically impossible to reach that far of a country within a 10-minute time span. So that's how you know there's something nefarious going on, such as an attacker logging into that account using a VPN or just being from a different country. Question 2. An individual is claiming to be from the IT department and is demanding confidential employee information. Which of the following best describes this process? Insider threat, impersonation, shadow IT, or malicious code? And the correct answer is impersonation, because what takes priority in this question is the fact that they're stating that they claim to be from the IT department, or they could claim to be a CEO, claim to be a user, or an employee. Whatever they're claiming to be, that's automatically associated with impersonation. Insider threat, once more, this just describes an employee in an organization who has malicious intentions. Shadow IT is the concept of users, employees, or anyone in an organization who's performing some sort of task with technology that they didn't have explicit authorization to perform. So, for example, one of the most common things that would happen in Shadow IT is that users or employees who are unknowing of the cybersecurity aspects of this will disable an antivirus or disable a firewall, or might try to attempt to grant themselves administrator privileges because they're trying to install an application and it's not working. So they're just clicking next, 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 next on the user account prompt, for example. And finally, malicious code describes any kind of malware in general, whether it be a virus, a worm, ransomware, anything of the sort. Question 3. Which of the following describes a compensating control for zero-day vulnerabilities? Segmenting devices, isolating affected systems, patching vulnerable devices, or scanning for rootkits? The correct answer is segmenting devices, because when you have a zero-day vulnerability, this is a very dangerous form of vulnerability because it has not been discovered up until this very moment. So you can't patch your systems because there's no patch available. It's just been discovered. So the next best thing you can do, which is the concept of a compensating control, is that when the primary control fails, you have to resort to the next best thing, which in this case is to segment your devices. And what segmenting your devices does is the concept of logically dividing your network using something like VLANs or virtual local area networks into divided security zones so that if an attacker were to gain access to one part of the network through exploiting this zero-day vulnerability, they wouldn't have access to the entire network or all the devices in the network. And finally, scanning for rootkits. This is not a compensating control because you're not compensating for a lack of a primary control. Rootkits are very sophisticated pieces of malware that operate at the kernel level, and they can't be detected sometimes depending on your antivirus software. Or even rootkits can be considered a zero-day vulnerability, but we're specifically looking for a compensating control, and that is when your primary control fails and you're forced to resort to a suboptimal control, in this case, to segment your devices. Question 4. Which of the following best describes a brute force attack? Endless passwords are attempted against a single account. A few common passwords are attempted before moving on. Intercepting a connection results in a compromised session. Or exploiting a vulnerability results in higher level privileges. And the correct answer is endless passwords are attempted against a single account, because this is the exact concept of a brute force attack where you try as many passwords as humanly possible against a single user account, doing whatever it takes in an attempt to log into that account successfully. And that's different from this one, whereby it's considered a password spraying attack, where you only try a single or a handful of very common passwords against a user account. And if you don't log in within the second, third, or fourth attempt, you don't try to keep logging in. You simply move on with your day and go on to the next user account. And there you try a lot of these common passwords like password 123, password 1234, and so on. And of course, the advantage of password spraying is that you don't get logged out of the account, which means that you don't trigger a notification for the official email owner because you only logged in incorrectly 1 or 2 times, or maybe 3 or 4 times, and then you went on your way. This one right here, intercepting a connection results in a compromised session. That's the description of an on-path attack or a man-in-the-middle attack, whereby an attacker will eavesdrop or intercept a connection between a client and a server. And finally, exploiting a vulnerability results in higher level privileges. This is the concept of privilege escalation. So this is when you exploit a very severe vulnerability, like a kernel level vulnerability in Linux, and that would allow you to gain higher level privileges. So for example, on Linux, you can achieve the root user, or on Windows, you can become the administrator user if you exploit certain very severe vulnerabilities. Question 5. An organization recently had its sensitive data exfiltrated from a disgruntled employee. Which of the following would have most likely prevented the attack? And choose two. Encryption, data loss prevention, least privilege, or disabling removable devices. And the correct answers are DLP and disabling removable devices, because here we have a insider threat. It's a disgruntled employee who's exfiltrating sensitive data, and the way you would have prevented that data from being transferred is through a DLP system, a data loss prevention system. And what this does is that it matches based on a set of rules that you can set. It searches for any kind of signs that data is being exfiltrated or sent or transferred outside the network when it shouldn't be. So for example, if it detects that your sensitive data is being exfiltrated, whether it's being through email, whether it's an employee who found sensitive credit card customer information and is sending that outside the organization, the DLP system can look and say, oh, well, I'm seeing all this information, all this credit card information and these credit card numbers. I'm going to block that so that this sensitive information does not get leaked outside of the organization. And disabling removable devices is the concept of disabling your USB ports, and that's why it's directly associated with this question because they're exfiltrating data one way or another. So if you disable your USB ports or your USB drives entirely, then it makes it that much harder to exfiltrate data. Least privilege is the concept of ensuring that your users, employees, and everyone else who works in the organization does not have excessive rights and permissions beyond what they need to have to perform their job. And encryption is the process of taking a string of text, which is known as clear text, and turning that into ciphertext, which just means encrypted text. Question 6. An attacker is performing active reconnaissance against a company network and identifies that FTP, SMB, and HTTP are all up and running. Which of the following is being described? Open service ports, default credentials, blockchain, or supply chain? The correct answer is open service ports because FTP is file transfer protocol, SMB, server message block, and so on. And these are protocols or live services that run on network devices. And that's why it's considered open service ports because these are considered services or ports that run and have a very specific function. Like HTTP is used to serve and have a web page up and running. FTP is to transfer files, and SMB is similarly also to transfer files. So default credentials is incorrect because this describes the concept of having your usernames and passwords being the exact same as what the manufacturer set when you first purchased that device. It's the default. So the most common default credentials that you'll see on devices are things like admin as the username and admin as the password, or admin as the username and blank as the password. Blockchain is the concept of cryptocurrency and public ledgers. So this will allow you to see all transactions that are occurring in real time. And for example, if you ever received any of those scam emails that say that you should send me Bitcoin for whatever reason, you can actually check their Bitcoin wallet publicly to see how much money was sent to that account. Or if you receive a ransomware note, then you'll be able to see the Bitcoin address that they demanded your money from, and you can go check that crypto wallet to see how much money was sent to that wallet because it's on the blockchain, it's on the public ledger. Supply chain is the concept of your vendors, your third-party vendors that give you software and hardware, and how vulnerabilities can come into your organization at the supply chain level well before you were ever aware of it. Question 7. Which of the following would most likely come from the internet and spread by itself across the network? Keylogger, worm, virus, or logic bomb? The correct answer is a worm because this is a self-replicating piece of malware. So the most common worm that exists is the WannaCry ransomware worm that exploited the SMB v1 vulnerability. Keylogger is a piece of malware that is either a software or it can be a hardware device, and this tracks all the keys that you type on your keyboard and sends it directly to the attacker or whoever installed this malware. A virus is attached to a standalone program or executable, and the virus can only be run if you execute or run that file in the first place, and that will run the virus alongside it. And that's different from a worm because a worm can simply exploit something like default credentials and enter your network and self-replicate to other vulnerable devices without you ever being aware of it or without having to execute a file for that malware to run, because a worm is self-replicating. And finally, a logic bomb is a piece of malware that will perform a specific function at a specific date and time. So for example, it could delete all the files on a specific server at midnight on Christmas, for example. Question 8. Which of the following attacks would most likely dump a table's output from a database? SQL injection, cross-site scripting, directory traversal, or ransomware? And the correct answer is SQL injection or structured query language injection. This is the concept of exfiltrating, viewing, or manipulating SQL or database information using a SQL statement such as apostrophe or 1 equals 1, because that is what is known as a true statement in SQL. So for example, in a login field, you could put admin as the username and apostrophe space or space 1 equals 1 in the password field, and that would attempt a SQL injection vulnerability. Cross-site scripting is the concept of injecting malicious JavaScript code into web pages. Directory traversal is the concept of viewing files on a web server that you shouldn't have access or authorization to view. It's typically associated with the .. parameter. And finally, ransomware is a piece of malware that encrypts your files and demands a ransom if you ever want to have access to your files again. But we're dumping a table's output from a database, and that's absolutely associated with SQL injection. Question 9. When exploited, which of the following would result in an upgrade of user privileges? Vishing, privilege escalation, DDoS, or on-path? And the correct answer is privilege escalation, because this describes exploiting a vulnerability and gaining higher level access or privileges within the organization. Vishing is voice phishing. It's phishing over the phone. So this is when you're extracting user information, such as their username or password or credit card information, or any kind of confidential or sensitive data over the phone. DDoS is a distributed denial of service attack, and this involves overwhelming a web server with endless requests of traffic. And an on-path attack is a man-in-the-middle attack. It's whereby an attacker intercepts or eavesdrops on a connection between a client and a server, stealing something like the session ID. But we're looking to upgrade our privileges, and that is the concept of privilege escalation. And question 10, which of the following would best describe the process of modifying firmware to install additional software? 0-day, jailbreaking, sideloading, or XSS? And the correct answer is jailbreaking, because this describes modifying your firmware on your mobile device, which would then allow you to perform tasks such as sideloading, which is the concept in and of itself of installing applications that are not native to the official App Store. And XSS is cross-site scripting, and this is the concept of an attacker injecting malicious JavaScript code into a web application. So those were the 10 questions of Domain 2, and if you're genuinely serious about passing your Security Plus exam on your first attempt, just as I did, then click the first link in the description and join my Telegram group, because there I post daily practice questions just like the ones featured in this video, and we're getting a great community of members there. And I answer all the questions that my members have. So if you want a question about how the Security Plus exam works, you want a more thorough explanation for any of the questions in this video, or if you just want me to answer any of your questions about cybersecurity in general, then feel free to message me there, and I'll be very happy to answer your question along with the other members. So click the first link, join the group, and I'll see you there.